An army of 5,000 Northmen are facing an enemy that have fortified themselves in the side of a cliff. The leaders of the Norwegian forces is in war council going over their options. We attack now. Every second spent hesitating is giving the enemy more time to fortify their position. Madness! A direct assault will be doomed to failure. We must accept the fact that we do not have sufficient forces to dislodge the enemy. King, what say you? The Norwegian army is seemingly at their wits' end, being 3,900 kilometers away from home, roughly the length from New York to Los Angeles. The problem is simple, but how do you overcome it? I want 2 ships taken above the cliff, along with strong ropes. King Sigurd, the first Magnusson of Norway, would not accept defeat without even attempting an attack. If Sigurd and his Norwegians didn't have the high ground, they were going to make their own. This is the saga of King Sigurd the Crusader. After the fall of King Magnus in Ireland, his 3 sons were each taken as King of Norway. During this time, the custom was that every son of the king had an equal claim to the throne. This meant that both Sigurd, Øystein and Olav would get their own part of the country to rule. Øystein got the north, Sigurd the south, while Olav was too young at the time to get any of the land, being only 5 years old, while Sigurd was 14 and Øystein was 1 year older. After the kings had been sworn in, the remainder of the party of Skofte Ogmundsson's journey to Rome had come back to Norway. The stories were told from both Miklagard, Constantinople, as well as Jorsal, Jerusalem. And these stories were told all over the nation, and it was said that there were Northmen in the service of the Byzantine emperor, and that there was an abundance of money to be made down there. Upon hearing of such opportunities, there were many who wanted to embark on such a journey themselves. So many in fact that it reached all the way up to the kings. The people asked them if one of them could lead the voyage down there to the Greek Ocean, the Mediterranean. King Sigurd and Øystein were positive to the request, and it was decided that they would collectively outfit a large fleet to set sail to Jerusalem and Constantinople. When the fleet was ready in autumn of 1107, there were altogether 60 ships, along with 5,000 men ready to set sail. And among the kings, it was decided that King Sigurd would be the one to lead the crusade, giving him the name Sigurd the Crusader, Norwegian Sigurd Jorsalfare, literally meaning Sigurd the Jerusalem Goer. Their first stop on their journey was over to England, but this time they did not come as Vikings or raiders, but as guests on their voyage to their common Holy Land. Here they met with the King of England, King Henry I, son of William the Conqueror. The Norwegians stayed here during the winter. When spring came, King Sigurd and the Norwegians bid their farewell and sailed south, past France and down to the Iberian Peninsula, the region of Galicia, where they spoke with the local earl and arranged that the Norwegians could stay here during the winter, and they were guaranteed that they could buy enough food and supplies during the winter. However, this promise lasted only to Christmas, when the food ran out. Snorre explains that this was due to the land being barren and hard to grow crops in. King Sigurd and his men marched on the castle of the local earl, but the earl fled because he was outnumbered. Sigurd and his men walked in without a fight and took everything they needed. All the food and supplies they needed were taken back to the ships, and the fleet sailed on. The journey went on further south down the Iberian coast, and here they had their first encounter with pagans. The so-called pagans referred to here are the Muslims that at the time inhabited and controlled the southern part of Iberia. The pagans were pirates and came towards the Norwegian fleet, and a battle was fought here between the two sides. Sigurd and his men won, capturing 8 galleys from the pagan fleet. The Norwegian crusade would go on to take the castle in the region of Sintra, as well as fighting a major battle near Lisbon, the now capital of Portugal. Here too, Sigurd won and gave the pagans either the option to convert to Christianity or be put to the sword, and large amounts of treasure were taken. The sources are not clear whether there were any coordination between the Northmen and the Portuguese, and Snorre himself makes no mention of any alliance or coordination between the parties. Regardless, the Portuguese would come to control the castle in Sintra. Next up was a castle south of Lisbon, in Alencer do Sal. The fourth battle was fought here, and here too Sigurd won, making it his fourth victory. Continuing down to the Strait of Gibraltar, they were once again faced with a pagan fleet. Here as well, a battle was fought and won, making it Sigurd's fifth victory. Sigurd and his men had now broken into the Mediterranean, or the Greek Sea as the Norse called it. They did not sail long before once again coming across more pagans, and this time they had fortified themselves on the island south of Ibiza, the island of Formentera. You see, the pagan pirates had fortified a cliff in a mountain that they used as their base of operation, carrying all their stolen riches inside. King Sigurd and the rest of the crusade decided to put an end to this, bringing us full circle from the intro. The Northmen dragged 2 ships over the cliff and filled it with as many men as they possibly could. Both were then lowered down the cliff, and before the pagans could react, there were suddenly 2 floating ships over them, shooting down arrows and throwing spears. The pagans were unable to hold their position and were forced to retreat further into the cliff, where they had made additional fortifications. King Sigurd now charged from the bottom along with the rest of the army, trapping the pagans inside the cliff. However, this was a mistake from the part of the pagans, because rather than attack them head-on, Sigurd ordered men to make large fires on the entrance of the cave. And when the smoke from the fire filled the caves, it made it impossible to stay inside the mountain. Some died of smoke inhalation, while others came trying to fight their way out, dying in the attempt. Here, the Northmen took the most valuable plunder on their journey. And like this, King Sigurd had won his 6th victory. The crusade continued, fighting battles both on Ibiza and Mallorca before arriving in Sicily. Sigurd and his party made landfall on the coast of Sicily in the spring of 1109 and met with the Earl of the island, Earl Roger II. He himself was a descendant of Northmen and welcomed the crusade with open arms. Sigurd and the army stayed in Sicily for a long time, and during this time he proclaimed Earl Roger to be king before sailing on, a title he would live up to in later years, conquering large land areas. The crusade sailed on yet again, and finally, after years, arrived in Jerusalem, where they met with the king of Jerusalem. And that king was none other than, that's right, you guessed it, King Baldwin of Jerusalem.
I am Jerusalem.
The first. King Baldwin I of Jerusalem. Not the one in the movie. He would not be born for another 50 years. King Sigurd and Baldwin together traveled down to the Jordan River, the same river Jesus himself had been baptized in. The Norwegian crusade stayed in the Holy Land during both autumn and winter, and while there they helped King Baldwin taking a city, the city of Sidon. Snorre sadly does not give any details about the battle, or much of the events in Jerusalem itself either. But he does tell us that while there, King Sigurd was given a splinter from the Holy Cross itself, the very same cross Jesus Christ himself was nailed to. And in return for taking this holy relic back to Norway, Sigurd proclaimed that he would spread Christianity in the north and enact the tiende, a special tax giving 10% specifically to the church. Having done their part in the crusade, Sigurd and his fleet once again set sail, this time for Miklagard, Constantinople. But closing in on the city, he wanted to make as elegant an impression as possible. Therefore, he waited with sailing in, despite the winds being favorable. This was due to him wanting to have side wind as he made an entrance. Like this, his sails would be fully visible and on full display for the entire city. King Sigurd had additionally ordered that his men were not to look impressed with the grand city they were about to enter, as to impress upon the emperor the strict discipline of the Norwegian army. And the emperor was indeed impressed. He rolled out the red carpet and opened the main gate, usually reserved for the emperor himself, returning from campaign. While in Constantinople, the emperor gave King Sigurd an offer. Receive 960 kilograms of gold, or use the same gold to arrange huge festivities in the Hippodrome, a massive horse race arena capable of seating 100,000 spectators. Sigurd chose the latter, and grand arrangements were made to make this happen, ending the Norwegian crusade on a high note. The time had now come to head home to Norway, although it is said that a lot of men chose to stay behind in Constantinople to serve in the army of the Byzantine emperor. A little side note: it is briefly mentioned that King Sigurd gave his ships to the emperor along with his own ship that had a golden head on it. This was taken to Peter's church, and I tried looking up this head in the hopes that it would still be in this church today. However, despite running both standard and hidden prompts through ChatGPT, the historic relic has sadly been lost to time. The Northmen were given horses and guides to lead them safely through the Byzantine lands. The journey home went largely uneventful, and the army reached Scandinavia around midsummer in Denmark. Here a large feast was arranged. Sigurd and the remaining men were given ships by the Danish king to sail home over Skagerrak and finally home to Norway after 3 years on crusade. King Sigurd had been 17 when he departed. He was now 20. The Norwegian crusade has officially come to an end. King Sigurd had been on a generational streak. When all was said and done, he had fought 8 battles and won every single one. One thing we must keep in mind is that during this whole time King Sigurd had been away, his brother, King Øystein, had been home in Norway, and he had been busy building churches, fortifications for defense, and harbors for boosting trade. Another major achievement King Øystein had been able to accomplish was the reintegration of the region of Jämtland into the Kingdom of Norway. And he had done so without military conquest, but with clever political positioning and generous gift-giving to local power holders of the region. To persuade the people, King Øystein spoke of all the good years that Jämtland had had under King Håkon the Good, a saga that I have covered previously on the channel, and of how beneficial Norwegian goods were for the region. And in time, he was able to convince the people to once again stand side by side with the Norwegian kingdom. Like this, Øystein was able to expand Norway's borders without any military activity, a testament to the power of the spoken word. King Øystein was of average height, with blue eyes and blonde curly hair. He was an intelligent king with great knowledge in both law and history. King Sigurd, on the other hand, was more of what you would think of as a typical Viking. Taller than most, not directly handsome, but had a manly appearance, with brown hair and strong stature. He was a quiet type, and at times sporadic and unpredictable, but towards his friends he was loyal and friendly. There weren't really 2 kings in Norway at the time. There were 3, the third child of King Magnus Barefoot, Olav Magnusson, but he was so young at the time and died of sickness at the age of only 17. This was in 1115 AD. 4 years had now gone by since King Sigurd had come home from his crusade. Snorre explains that there were good years in Norway and the people were content. The splinter from the Holy Cross that King Sigurd had gotten in Jerusalem was taken to the church near modern-day city of Göteborg. You see, the Swedes were still largely pagan, and it was believed that placing such a holy relic near the pagans would help defend the nation against outside forces. But placing it so close to the pagans would turn out to be a mistake. As 5 years after King Sigurd had died, the church was raided and the holy splinter was stolen by pagan hands. But for the time being, there were good years. However, the good years did not last forever. The cracks in the 2 kings' friendship would take center stage during one winter when they were guesting together in the region of Upplandet. It was late one evening, and the mood amongst the men were damper due to the beer that they had been served were subpar. There were clearly some tension in the air, and King Øystein made an attempt to lighten the mood with a friendly competition called mannjevning that was customary at the time. The point of this game was to compare one's own achievements and deeds towards others. You can likely see where this is going. King Sigurd was in no mood for games, preferring to drink his beer in peace, but King Øystein persisted. First off, I would like to state that we are both equal in both rank and riches, and I make no difference between us either in our heritage or upbringing. King Sigurd broke in. Have you forgotten that I could put you on your back whenever I wanted, even though you were 1 year older than I? No, but neither have I forgotten that you were of no use in games that required agility. Do you remember how it went when we would swim? I could dunk you under whenever I wanted. I did not swim any shorter than you, and was by no means the worst when it came to swimming underwater. I could also ice skate, and I know no one could outrace me on them, but you were helpless on ice. I believe it is much more useful and a more fitting sport for a ruler to be a prudent archer. But I bet you couldn't draw my bow even if you used your legs as leverage. I am maybe not as strong as an archer as you, but when it comes to shooting on a target, the difference is lesser, and I am better than you on skis, which was considered a good sport in the past. The two brother kings kept at it, and both of them became angrier and angrier, until Sigurd said that he had tied a knot for King Øystein near the Jordan River in the Holy Land. You see, it was a commonly held belief at the time that tying a knot for someone would bring misfortune on that person. King Øystein revealed ambiguously that he too had tied such a knot for King Sigurd, and the room fell dead silent. Both kings were now in a terrible mood, and the festivities were ended. Some time after this, King Sigurd was guesting, also this time in the region of Uppland. Here he had the bath prepared, but when he was bathing, something peculiar happened. He claimed that he saw a fish swimming in the bathwater before he started laughing uncontrollably. King Sigurd was starting to lose his mind. This, coupled with the fact that the two kings were all but friendly towards one another, were creating the groundwork for a civil war. The Kingdom of Norway had narrowly avoided a civil war during the reign of the previous king, Magnus Barefoot. But now that same possibility was rearing its head yet again. King Øystein was up in Nidaros building a large warship with the dimensions of the famous longship Ormen Lange, King Olav Tryggvason's large Viking ship, 45 meters in length or 150 feet. However, here the saga takes a turn. In the year 1123, King Øystein got sick and died at Hustad in Romsdal. The two brothers never took up arms against one another, and Sigurd was now the sole ruler of Norway. The reign of King Sigurd was for the most part a peaceful one, except for the one time in 1123, when the Leidang was called upon to Christianize the pagans in Swedish Småland. The term Leidang is a Norwegian concept used in the Viking Age for total mobilization. The number of soldiers that could theoretically be called upon has been estimated to be around 26 to 34,000. Considering the Norwegian total population at the time was probably around 200,000, speaks to the fact that Norway during this time was a thoroughly militarized society, with around 15% of the total population being able to be called upon at any time. Even when King Harald Hardråde crossed the North Sea in 1066 to later fight at the Battle of Stamford Bridge with around 10,000 men, he only took along half of the men that he could potentially have called upon. This level of total military mobilization is unparalleled outside of Scandinavia during this time period, and similar level of military service relative to population would not be seen again until the birth of nationalism in a Napoleonic age. Anyways, back to our saga of Sigurd the Crusader. The campaign into Småland had been a success, having Christianized the region and taking large amount of spoils back home. Some while after this campaign, King Sigurd was at one of his residences when he had just woken up and gotten dressed. His men saw that he was mute and had a serious expression on his face. Thinking that his madness had gotten the better of him, as it would from time to time, they were cautious while initiating a conversation with him. The farm administrator spoke up. Have you received some bad news? Maybe the service have been subpar, or is there another matter entirely that could be rectified? King Sigurd responded. The reason is that I had a dream this night. I was standing outside here on the shores of Jæren when I saw something large and dark coming towards me, and when it came closer, it became apparent that this was a grand tree. But when it reached the coast, it shattered, with pieces of the tree being flung to every part of Norway. Every coastline settlement got some part of this tree, some big, but most of them were small. The farm administrator was taken aback by this. This dream, I think, is best that you decipher for yourself. but we would love to hear what you think of it. Sigurd responded, I find it most probable that it is a warning about the man that will come to Norway, and that his descendants will inhabit this land, but live under different living conditions. The Jarl of Møre had some time after this sailed to the west, to the Hebrides, when a man came to him and introduced himself as Gillekrist. He claimed that his father was King Magnus Barefoot, giving him just as valid of a claim to the Norwegian throne as King Sigurd, since royal inheritance law at the time did not discriminate between the sons of the king. He explained further that he also had a Scandinavian name, Harald. People therefore referred to him as Harald Gille. The Jarl of Møre and Harald sailed back to Norway, and once there, Harald was taken before King Sigurd and explained that the two of them were brothers. Sigurd said that he did not want to prevent him from proving who he was by divine intervention, as long as he promised not to make any claims on the throne. This was agreed, but how does one prove one's word by divine intervention? There was a method at the time known as å gå jernbyrd, to walk the iron burden. People thought at the time that this trial was unreasonably harsh, considering that Harald Gille had already swore by oath that he would not make any claims upon the throne. Either way, Harald accepted. He fasted for some time, before undergoing the harshest trial by ordeal that has ever taken place in Norway, Snorre remarks. 9 pieces of glowing hot metal were laid down on the ground in front of Harald, that he had to walk over, barefoot, alongside 2 bishops. The thinking behind this was that if the feet had been healed within 3 days, that would be taken as a sign of divine intervention, and the claim would therefore be true. If God did not intervene, the claim would be considered false. And amazingly, 3 days later, Harald Gille's feet were examined and were completely healed, verifying his claim as King Sigurd's brother. In addition to Harald Gille's oath that he would not make any claims upon the throne, King Sigurd made every person in Norway swear that he would take his son Magnus as king after his passing. Although King Sigurd could not have known it at the time, after this trial, the first domino had already fallen. Sigurd would pass away in the year 1130, and Harald Gille would break his oath of not claiming the throne. Him and Magnus would start the Norwegian Civil War that would last 110 years. After writing 900 pages of what is widely regarded as the best work of literature from the Viking Age, and I would go as far as to say as the most important work for Norway as a nation, period, the great man that was Snorre Sturlason would eventually lose his life in this civil war himself. But that's a story for another video. This was the saga of Sigurd the Crusader by Snorre Sturlason. Thank you for watching.